Welcome back to Military History Hub. Today we'll tell the story of a battle that changed the entire Pacific War. Just 6 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan believed it was unstoppable. But in June 1942, a small group of American ships and pilots stopped Japan's advance in one of the most decisive naval battles in history. This is the story of the Battle of Midway, a turning point that changed World War II forever. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japan quickly expanded across the Pacific. Japanese forces captured the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, and large parts of Southeast Asia. The Japanese Navy appeared powerful and unstoppable. The United States suffered heavy losses at Pearl Harbor, but the U.S. aircraft carriers survived because they were not in the harbor during the attack. These carriers became the most important weapon for the U.S. Navy in the Pacific. Japan believed that the United States was weak and needed time to recover. Japanese leaders wanted to destroy the remaining American carriers before the U.S. could rebuild its fleet. They believed that if they eliminated U.S. naval power completely, America would be forced to negotiate peace. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Japanese Navy, planned a new operation. His goal was to lure American carriers into a trap and destroy them in a decisive battle. To do this, Japan chose a small island in the Central Pacific called Midway Atoll. Midway was important because it served as a U.S. military base and outpost. If Japan captured Midway, it could threaten Hawaii and extend its defensive perimeter. Yamamoto believed the United States would defend Midway at all costs. The Japanese plan was complex. It involved multiple naval groups, aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and submarines. Japan believed the Americans would not know about the attack until it was too late. However, the Japanese made one critical mistake. They underestimated American intelligence. The U.S. Navy had broken parts of Japan's naval communication code. This allowed American commanders to know when and where the Japanese attack would happen. Instead of walking into a trap, the Americans prepared one of their own. By early June 1942, both sides were moving toward Midway. Japan believed it held the advantage. The United States knew it was about to fight a battle that could decide the future of the Pacific War. The stage was set. After their early victories in the Pacific, Japanese leaders believed they had gained the upper hand. Their navy had defeated major Allied forces and expanded Japan's control over a vast area. However, one concern remained: the United States aircraft carriers. The Japanese command knew that as long as American carriers were still operating, the war was far from over. These carriers had already shown their importance in early raids against Japanese positions. Japanese leaders decided that the next major objective should be the complete destruction of U.S. carrier power in the Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto designed the plan for the Midway operation. The goal was to lure the American fleet into a decisive battle. Yamamoto believed that if Japan could draw U.S. carriers toward Midway, the combined power of the Japanese Navy would destroy them in a single confrontation. Midway Atoll was chosen for strategic reasons. It was a key American outpost in the Central Pacific and served as an early warning base for Hawaii. If Japan captured Midway, it could threaten U.S. positions and force the American fleet to respond. Japanese intelligence believed the U.S. would not allow Midway to fall without a fight. The plan involved multiple task forces spread over a wide area. Japanese aircraft carriers would attack Midway first, damaging its air defenses. This would force the U.S. Navy to send its carriers to counterattack. Once the American carriers revealed their position, Japanese forces would strike them with overwhelming force. Japan committed 4 of its most powerful aircraft carriers to this operation. These carriers had participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor and were crewed by experienced pilots. Japanese commanders were confident that their crews were superior to American pilots, whom they believed lacked experience. The plan also included battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. Submarines were positioned to detect American movements, and surface forces were intended to finish off any damaged U.S. ships. On paper, the plan appeared strong and carefully designed. However, the Japanese plan had serious weaknesses. The fleet was divided into several distant groups, which reduced mutual support. Communication between the groups was limited. Most importantly, Japanese leaders believed their radio communications were secure. They did not know that American codebreakers were already reading parts of their messages. Japan expected surprise to be on its side. Commanders were confident that the U.S. Navy would not know the details of the attack until Midway was already under heavy assault. This belief shaped every part of the operation and led to critical overconfidence. As Japanese forces sailed toward Midway in late May 1942, their commanders believed they were setting a trap that would crush American naval power. They expected a decisive victory that would secure Japan's dominance in the Pacific. But while Japan was preparing its trap, the United States was already waiting. One of the most important reasons the United States succeeded at the Battle of Midway was intelligence. Long before the first shots were fired, American codebreakers had already changed the direction of the battle. The U.S. Navy had been working for months to break Japanese naval communication codes. These messages were thought to be secure by Japanese commanders, but American cryptanalysts were slowly uncovering their meaning. By early 1942, the U.S. Navy could read enough of the Japanese code to understand general plans and movements. American intelligence began intercepting messages that mentioned a target called AF. The Japanese planned something important involving this location, but American analysts did not initially know what AF referred to. Some believed it was Midway, but confirmation was needed. To test this theory, the U.S. Navy sent a simple but clever message. Midway transmitted an unencrypted radio report stating that the island's water supply was failing. Shortly afterward, Japanese intelligence messages were intercepted saying that AF was experiencing a water shortage. This confirmed that AF was Midway. With this knowledge, American commanders now knew where and when the Japanese attack would come. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, immediately began planning a response. Instead of reacting to a surprise attack, the United States would position its forces in advance. Despite heavy losses at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Navy still had 3 operational aircraft carriers available for the battle: Enterprise, Hornet, and the damaged but repaired Yorktown. The Yorktown had been severely damaged in an earlier battle, but was repaired quickly and secretly. Japanese intelligence believed it was out of action. Nimitz ordered these carriers to move into position northeast of Midway, where they could launch an ambush. The plan was risky. American carriers would be outnumbered, and a single mistake could cause disaster. However, the advantage of surprise gave the U.S. a chance it otherwise would not have had. American commanders also prepared aircraft on Midway itself. These planes would attack the Japanese fleet as soon as it appeared, forcing Japanese carriers to defend themselves and disrupt their attack plans. The key to the American strategy was timing. They needed to strike the Japanese carriers while their planes were refueling and rearming, when the decks were crowded and the ships were most vulnerable. Intelligence gave the United States the chance to strike at exactly the right moment. While Japanese forces believed the United States was unaware of the operation, American ships quietly moved into position. Radar, reconnaissance aircraft, and submarine patrols were set up to confirm Japanese movements. The stage was now set for a battle unlike any before it. Both sides were approaching Midway, but only one of them knew what the other was planning. The advantage of information was about to decide the fate of the Pacific War. In the early morning hours of June 4, 1942, the first phase of the Battle of Midway began. Japanese reconnaissance aircraft were launched to search for American ships around the island. At the same time, Japanese bombers prepared to strike Midway itself. Shortly after dawn, Japanese aircraft from 4 carriers launched a massive air attack on Midway Atoll. The goal was to destroy American airfields, aircraft, and defenses on the island, making it easier to capture Midway later. Despite being outnumbered, American forces on Midway launched every available aircraft to attack the approaching Japanese fleet. Many of these planes were older models and poorly armed, but they forced Japanese carriers to stay alert and react. The Japanese attack caused significant damage on Midway, but it did not destroy the airfields completely. American planes were still able to operate. Japanese commanders debated whether a second attack on Midway was needed to finish the job. At this point, a critical decision was made. Japanese aircraft returning from the first strike needed to land. Their planes had to refuel and rearm. Some were armed with bombs for land targets, while others were prepared with torpedoes for ships. This created confusion on the carrier decks. While Japanese crews were in the middle of reorganizing their aircraft, Reports arrived that American ships had been spotted nearby. Japanese commanders now faced a difficult choice. They could launch an immediate attack with the planes available, or delay and prepare a better organized strike. They chose to rearm their planes for an attack on U.S. carriers. This decision required time. Bombs had to be removed, torpedoes brought on deck, and fuel lines connected. Japanese carrier decks became crowded with aircraft, weapons, and fuel. Meanwhile, American carrier aircraft were already on the way. U.S. torpedo squadrons attacked first. They flew low over the ocean, facing heavy anti-aircraft fire and fighter opposition. These attacks suffered terrible losses and scored no direct hits. However, the torpedo attacks served a critical purpose. Japanese fighters were pulled down low to defend against them. This left the sky above the fleet less protected. At the same moment, American dive bombers arrived from high altitude. The timing was decisive. The battlefield was about to change completely. As Japanese carriers were in the middle of refueling and rearming their aircraft, American dive bombers arrived over the fleet. These planes came from the U.S. carriers Enterprise and Yorktown. Because Japanese fighters were focused on low-altitude threats, the dive bombers faced little resistance as they approached from above. Within minutes, the situation changed completely. American bombs struck 3 Japanese aircraft carriers almost simultaneously. The carriers Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were hit, while their decks were crowded with fully fueled aircraft, bombs, and torpedoes. The explosions caused massive fires that crews could not control. The damage was catastrophic. Fires spread rapidly through hangars and internal compartments. Efforts to save the ships failed. Within a few hours, all 3 carriers were burning beyond recovery. Japan still had one remaining carrier, Hiryu. Its commander quickly launched counterattacks against the U.S. fleet. Japanese aircraft from Hiryu managed to strike the USS Yorktown, causing serious damage. Yorktown was hit by bombs and later torpedoes, forcing the crew to abandon ship temporarily. Despite this success, American forces continued pressing the attack. U.S. dive bombers located Hiryu later that same day. American bombs struck the carrier, starting fires similar to those that destroyed the other Japanese carriers. By the end of June 4th, all 4 Japanese aircraft carriers involved in the battle were lost or fatally damaged. Japan had also lost many of its most experienced pilots and aircrew. These losses could not be easily replaced. The United States lost the USS Yorktown, which was later sunk by a Japanese submarine. However, the American losses were far smaller compared to Japan's losses. The outcome of the battle was now clear. The Japanese Navy had lost the core of its carrier striking force. A fleet that once dominated the Pacific was suddenly weakened. The turning point had been reached. Midway had changed the course of the war. The Battle of Midway ended on June 7, 1942, but its effects were felt for the rest of World War II. What happened near this small island permanently changed the balance of power in the Pacific. For Japan, Midway was a major disaster. The loss of 4 aircraft carriers was a blow the Japanese Navy could not recover from. These ships were the heart of Japan's naval strength. Even more damaging was the loss of experienced pilots and crew members. Japan could replace ships over time, but it could not quickly replace trained aircrews. From this point forward, Japanese carrier forces were weaker with every battle. The battle also ended Japan's expansion in the Pacific. Before Midway, Japan had been on the offensive, moving from victory to victory. After Midway, Japan was forced into a defensive position. Strategic plans changed. Instead of expanding, Japan now focused on protecting what it had already captured. For the United States, Midway provided confidence and momentum. It proved that Japan could be defeated. American commanders gained confidence in carrier warfare, intelligence operations, and coordinated naval tactics. The importance of aircraft carriers over battleships became clear, shaping naval strategy for the rest of the war. Midway also confirmed the importance of intelligence. Breaking Japanese codes allowed the United States to choose the battlefield and control the timing of the fight. Without this advantage, the outcome might have been very different. Intelligence became one of the most powerful weapons of the war. After Midway, the United States began shifting to the offensive. Within months, American forces launched operations in the Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal. The strategy of island hopping slowly pushed Japanese forces back across the Pacific. The battle also affected morale. In the United States, Midway erased the sense of defeat left by Pearl Harbor. It became proof that the tide of war could turn. For Japan, Midway was the moment when the war stopped going according to plan. Historians often describe Midway as the most important naval battle of World War II. It lasted only a few days, but its consequences shaped the next 3 years of fighting. It turned Japan from an advancing power into a nation fighting to survive. Midway was not just a battle of ships and planes. It was a battle of planning, intelligence, timing, and decisions made under enormous pressure. Small choices at critical moments determined the fate of fleets and nations. With the victory at Midway, the United States took the first major step toward defeating Japan. The long road ahead would be difficult and costly, but the direction of the war was clear. The Battle of Midway marked the moment when the Pacific War changed forever.